sensitive and emotional issue for a lot of families who went through those very, very dark times. But politically, it's a non-issue. However, that's not so the case for Canada. In Canada, it is a very relevant political issue. Mr. Trudeau himself, I mean, has a minority government which is surviving because of his informal alliance with the NDP, which is again led by a Sikh leader. The Sikh population themselves form a significant share of the voter base. So unlike India, Khalistan is very, very important in the domestic politics of Canada.
There certainly could be a lot from this diplomatic rift.
I would go to the extent of calling it a diplomatic crisis because it is an extreme step that shows complete breakdown of trust between nations. It's a fairly rare move. It's not very common. Typically, these things are handled, through back channels in a diplomatic way. But if you're saying it in Parliament and saying it out loud, clearly you're asking for scrutiny, right? You're asking for international attention. So again, I think it is a deliberate way. I mean, when we got our independence way back in 1947, Canada was one of the first few countries to recognize India and establish diplomatic ties. But since then, the relationship has seen both its ups and downs. For example, in the 1970s, when India had the nuclear test, that was a sore point. But in the 1980s, we had the huge Sikh population migrate from India to Canada, which kind of always lends itself to cultural ties, right? But that was also the time that the Sikh separatist movement was at its peak here. So it's been a sticky point always. In the present day context, now, interestingly, Mr. Trudeau was here in 2018. And that trip got a lot of media coverage, but not all of it was pleasant and nice. It was a fairly controversial trip. In 2020, we had the farmers protesting in India. Again, Mr. Trudeau made a statement supporting the farmers, which didn't really go down very well with the Indian government because, again, you see it as meddling in our internal affairs, right? And then very recently, we had the huge G20 summit that India was hosting. It was seen as a success, because of all the bonhomie and the friendship and the camaraderie with all the leaders, except for Mr. Trudeau. Again, that got a lot of media attention because there was visible tension between the two leaders. Last few years has definitely been rocky.